Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to this episode of Voices of a Killer on the case of Chris Piersee and the tragic deaths of Tish Piersee and Landon Piersee. When we last left off, Chris was telling us about the birth of his beautiful baby boy Landon and how his relationship with Tish had been flourishing after the tragedy of a prior miscarriage. We rejoin Chris now on the fateful night of the tragic murders on this episode of Voices of a Killer.
The day that this happened, the week prior to that, this crime, is that week just like any other week?
No, for a few weeks before this, I had been with my brother-in-law. We had been taking the Coricidin cough and cold medicine.
What is it called?
And it's called Coricidin cough and cold medicine. People used to call it triple C's. It's a cough medicine that if you take a whole bunch of it, you'll hallucinate.
I don't know if you're locked up with him, but he was a young guy that was doing the same thing. And it was you just take it in large quantities and it really messes with your head. And he actually killed on it as well. So you're linking up with your brother-in-law and y'all are doing this cough medicine, which is over the counter. And y'all are doing it recreationally weeks prior together.
Yeah, one of my friends had done it one night, and I had gone over to his house and he had a whole bunch. And my brother-in-law was over there. And we decided to take it with them. And it was, like I said, this was when weed wasn't legal. And a lot of times you couldn't find it. And so here we are. We've got this thing that gets us 10 times higher. And you can buy it in the grocery store. And we started taking it.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, it was probably about a month to a month and a half before all this happened, that we started taking it pretty much every day. So
tell me what initially, like when you first started doing it, give me an example of how it makes you feel to where you would want to continue doing it.
So at first, one of the first nights I remember we took it and we were watching the movie and I felt super peaceful, but I felt like really like almost this ecstasy kind of feeling. I remember Tish telling me the next day that she liked when I had taken it because I was like, she said that I was like so loving and stuff on it because I remember I kept looking at her thinking, oh my God, it's so weird today. And I was just, I don't know, it was just this weird euphoric sort of feeling. Like everything just felt great.
She didn't have an objection to you doing that?
Not at first.
Yeah.
I think at first she was pretty used to me smoking weed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think at first, I don't think she really looked at it as much different than that.
Well, that was a pretty quick progression because it's just months before, a month and a half, like you said, and then all of a sudden something happens. So now it looks like you locked onto this drug and you're doing it pretty much and at a heavy doses. Is that right?
Yeah, we were taking 2 boxes of teas per day.
Before the crime happened, did this drug make you do anything else that was outlandish to where you recognized that it was way different than what you should be doing?
About maybe 2-3 weeks into doing it, we had a really weird thing happen, hard to make it make sense. We started having these thoughts that we were somehow getting enlightened. Right? We hear about like hippies doing a lot of acid in the 60s or something and talking about achieving enlightenment. And it was almost that kind of thought, right? We had opened up something in our mind that we started understanding. And the truth is I look back on it now and I realize we weren't enlightened. And, enlightened. We weren't understanding anything. But at the time we thought we'd unlocked the keys to the universe or something. And it got weird. I remember Timmy, he got to the point to where he thought he could hear people's thoughts. He actually had a full-on psychotic breakdown about a day before everything happened.
He got put in the hospital for the breakdown?
Yeah, he did.
So before the actual murder, did this cough medication ever make you violent or lash out?
No, but I had also never really done it before leading up to that time period. I knew friends that did when I was younger and stuff, and I think I tried it one time in high school, if I'm not mistaken, but I think I only took a couple and nothing actually happened.
Chris had been experimenting with Coricidin, also known as triple C's, a common over-the-counter cough and cold medicine. When taken in normal doses, it provides relief for cold symptoms. But when abused in large amounts, like Chris and his brother-in-law were doing, it can have powerful hallucinogenic effects. Users can experience heightened euphoria, altered perception of reality, and even dangerous psychotic breaks. The drug contains dextromethorphan, or DXM, which, in high doses, is known to cause dissociation, confusion, and unpredictable behavior. For Chris, what started as an escape turned into something much darker. He described feeling peaceful at first, even claiming that it made him feel more loving and relaxed around his wife. But over time, his use increased drastically, and the effects became far more sinister. As he continued to take 2 full boxes of Coricidin per day, his mind started to unravel. The drug distorted his sense of reality, and both he and his brother-in-law began to believe they had unlocked the keys to the universe. The euphoria was short-lived, replaced by paranoia, delusions, and a psychotic break that landed his brother-in-law in the hospital. Chris was spiraling, and little did he know that the altered state of mind caused by the Coricidin would play a role in the tragic event that would soon follow.
So Chris, tell me what happened that night, starting from the beginning.
So like that day, we had gone out. I hadn't taken any that morning. I had taken some the night before. I woke up and I was feeling off, but it's hard to explain, but it's this sort of weird thing where it almost feels like everything's shiny, like bright, like it's,
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a hard thing to explain.
Sure. Your vision changed?
Yeah. And so we went out that day to get our taxes done, and went out. I think if I remember right, I think we went out and got some Chinese food because that was Tish's favorite. It was one of my favorites too, but we used to go to Quincy all the time to get Chinese food and go and get our taxes done. We hung out in Quincy for a little while. And like I said, I was feeling a little off, but I wasn't feeling terrible or anything. But Timmy was still in the hospital. I think we had gone to visit him the day before, and we were talking about going to see him again, which that's crazy how he had broken down and everything in and of itself. But so we met up with my grandma a little later in the evening, went and had dinner at the casino there in town, and went home. And everything was good. It was a good day. We were excited about the money we were going to be getting on our tax returns. We were talking about either buying Tish another car or fixing her car because it was broken down at the time. And it was just a really nice day. And we went back to the house and started cleaning up because her dad and stepmom, they were over-the-road truck drivers, like I said. They were coming off the road the next day. And so we wanted to straighten up the house and cleaned up for a little while. And like I said, I kept feeling a little off.
And who's all there at the house?
It was just me, Tish, and Landon at the time when we went home.
You, your girl, and your son?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you do more of the cough medicine?
I didn't that day.
Okay.
I didn't do any more that day. But what did end up happening was a few hours after we started cleaning and stuff, my friend Tyler came over and he asked if he could borrow an Xbox controller. And then I ran over to his house to drop off the Xbox controller and to get some weed from him. We sat down in his house and smoked, I think, just a joint or so. And I got in the car to go home. And I remember on the way home, it's probably one of the last things that's still real clear. And I remember just having this feeling.
What time of day was it?
This would have been at night. This was probably 9, 10 at night.
Okay. And tell me about what was going on.
And on the way home, I was just having these thoughts about, like I said, it'll sound stupid, but like I had unlocked the keys to the universe or something. I had never, and I remember thinking that what I was feeling was exactly what everyone in the world's meant to feel, like this ecstasy kind of feeling of just everything perfect and stuff. And I remember thinking that I wanted to go home and tell Tish about it. And I remember on the way home, and like I said, this was one of the last real clear things. I remember thinking that I had to whisper it to her because I didn't want anybody to overhear, because still thinking like my brother-in-law with his whole thing with being able to hear people's thoughts and stuff. And if anybody else overheard, they would try to take it and all this. And it's one of those things in a sober mindset, thinking back on it,
Sure.
you understand how crazy it sounds. But
so what did you whisper into her ear?
So I just told her that I think I said something like, I figured it out. It's ecstasy. This is how everyone's supposed to feel.
What did she say to you?
Yeah, I remember her just laughing. She was actually laughing because I was whispering it to her, and she had really sensitive ears. If you kissed her on the ear, she'd like jump and giggle and stuff.
Yeah.
And as I did that, like I said, she laughed and I kissed her. And I remember we moved over to the couch and started messing around. And I remember we were starting to take our clothes off and stuff. And one of the next things, I remember I'm standing, because we had moved into the front room, but then I remember standing in the dining room. And when I was in the dining room, it was like the ceiling was being pulled off the house. And I didn't, I don't know, it's like I was in a storm.
Do you think that you being high and then being aroused with a sexual arousal kind of intensified your high?
It could be. It definitely could be, because it seems like that's about the moment where everything really went super haywire.
So was she seeing you like real intoxicated and like out of it right there? Was she noticing you thinking the roof was coming off and things like that?
At this point, at the point where the roof was coming off, I don't know, because it was right around that time that I had the gun in my hand.
Where did you get the gun from?
The gun was actually on the kitchen table, and that was because of the night that hit me.
So y'all are going from having sex to you grabbing a gun?
Yeah, we were on the couch in the front room, and then, like I said, it just almost skips forward, like in my memory, almost like skips forward to me being in the dining room.
Coricidin users like Chris often report feelings of dissociation and intense confusion, making it hard to distinguish between what's real and what isn't. As Chris described, he experienced the world as shiny and bright, his sense of reality completely skewed. This distortion of reality can become so severe that users forget where they are, and their surroundings may appear completely transformed. But amidst these hallucinations and distorted perceptions, there was something much more dangerous in the room: a gun. We must highlight how Chris doesn't address why the gun was there or how it came to be on the kitchen table. Did he have it for self-defense? Or is there a part of the story that in Chris's Coricidin-affected mind is missing? Nevertheless, its presence in such a fragile, altered state of mind would soon prove to be deadly. What role did the gun play in the tragic events of that night? We'll uncover the harrowing details after the break.
Did she say anything when you went and grabbed it, like when you scooped it off the table? Because you're supposed to be being intimate with her and you're going to get a gun.
At that point, she was already in the dining room, and she was on the ground in the doorway of the dining room. She wasn't shot yet, but...
Why was she on the ground? She was on the ground to have sex with you?
I don't know why she was on the ground there.
Did you hit her?
I don't think that I hit her, because...
If you were to guess, why would you go from going to get the gun and all of a sudden she's on the ground in the hallway or something?
I'm thinking maybe where we were on the couch, that if I just, if she was on top of me and I jumped up off of the couch, that would maybe be where she landed.
Okay. So whenever you got the gun and you turned around and look at her, she's still laying there. Did you shoot her while she was on the ground?
I don't really know if that's when I shot her.
Tell me what you remember.
What I remember is that, like I said, the ceiling seemed like it just ripped off. It was like I was in like a snowstorm. If you imagine like a blizzard where everything's hitting you in the face, only it wasn't snow. It was like almost like I was caught in like a sandblaster or something. It just felt like everything was just flying at me. And I remember swinging the gun, like swinging it out at stuff, like trying to swat away whatever was hitting me. And and I remember unloading the gun.
Unloading it by taking the bullets out of it, or unloading it by pulling the trigger?
Like pulling the trigger.
And where are you pointing when you do that?
I was pointing at the things that seemed like they were hitting me. One point, I remember it was like there was this thing up above me, like where the ceiling had been, and it was coming down like almost like, I don't know, spread out. Like it was like a person, but it was spread out almost like a hand that was coming down. And I remember shooting at that at one point.
What is your wife saying this whole time?
I couldn't hear her say anything.
So you're just completely out of it.
Yeah, at that point, I don't know if she was. So what happens next?
Because you not only killed your wife, but you also killed your son, right?
Yeah. It was a minute after that. Things seemed like they slowed down for a second. But it was still like being in that snowstorm. I remember running to get Landon and like in my mind I was saying, I just need to get him out of the house. And we lived right by the river, and for some reason I had it in my head that we needed to get on a boat and get away. And we were right on the Mississippi. And,
have you already killed her?
I think so at this point.
The chaos Chris was experiencing in that moment was unimaginable. His mind, warped by the effects of the Coricidin, had plunged him into a full-blown hallucination. He described a scene where the ceiling ripped off and the world around him transformed into a violent storm of sensations. It felt like he was caught in a blizzard or a sandstorm, with objects flying toward him, attacking him from every direction. The distortion of reality was overwhelming, and in the middle of it all, there was a gun in his hand. As he tried to swat away these perceived threats, Chris unloaded the gun, pulling the trigger in a haze, unable to differentiate between the hallucinations and the real world. The presence of the gun, introduced in this altered state, became the catalyst for the tragedy that was about to unfold. While Chris's memories are scattered and confused, it's clear that his actions that night would have devastating consequences for both his wife, Tish, and his son, Landon. The presence of that gun would change everything, but what exactly happened next? We'll find out on the next episode of Voices of a Killer. If you want to find out what happens next, right now, you can sign up at patreon.com/voicesofakiller. There you can find bonus content, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community. So go to patreon.com/voicesofakiller to sign up now. Your support is what keeps us passionate about bringing these stories to you. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.